Hey all, my name is Will Lawson. This is the Morning Report. There are moments when a legal story breaks through the noise, not because it's loud, but because it quietly exposes something deeply, deeply unsettling about how the system actually works. Whether what's unfolding inside the Supreme Court in Georgia may indeed be one of those moments. At first glance, this looks like a technical issue, bad citations and a legal brief. But when you take a closer look, it becomes something that's far more serious. And we're not talking about a typo or a misplaced comma or even a misreading of a case. What we're talking about citations to cases that don't exist, quotations that were never written, and legal arguments built on authority that appears to be fabricated. And if that's true, if this is more than a one-off mistake, then we are not just dealing with a flawed brief. We are dealing with a potential crack in the foundation of trust that holds the whole legal system together. Let's talk about specifics here. The case at the center of this controversy is Hannah Renee Payne versus the state. And the state is Georgia. It is a criminal matter, but what makes it extraordinary is not the underlying facts of the case. It is what the court discovered in filings submitted to the state. In a sharply worded order dated March 20th, 2026, so this was just yesterday, the Georgia Supreme Court did something courts rarely do in such a directed and public way. It ordered the state's counsel to submit a sworn affidavit explaining how a series of deeply problematic citations had made their way into official court filings. The court didn't speculate. It listed examples, cases cited that do not exist, cases quoted for language that does not exist, cases cited for propositions they don't support. Now, this isn't some gray area. This is black and white. Now, of course, for us to understand why this is such a big deal, you have to understand how the legal system actually functions. The law is not just statutes written in books. It's built on precedent, prior decisions that guide future rulings. Lawyers argue by pointing to those precedents or those cases, and judges rely on them to make decisions that are consistent, predictable, and fair. In other words, citations are the backbone of legal reasoning. When an attorney cites a case, they're not just referencing it, they're making a representation to the court. This is real, this is accurate, and you can rely on this. If that representation is false, whether intentionally or through negligence, the entire structure of the argument collapses. And if courts cannot trust the citations placed before them, then the system itself begins to wobble. All right. And what makes this situation more troubling is that the court is not dealing with a single instance. The order references multiple filings across different dates. A May 2nd, 2025 brief, an August 8th, 2025 brief, an August 19th, 2025 supplemental brief. In each instance, some of the same problematic citations appear. So it raises a critical question. How does something like this happen more than once? The court clearly wants an answer, and not just an explanation. but a complete accounting under oath. The order is not vague, it is precise, methodical, and comprehensive. The state's counsel must explain this: how non existent cases were cited, how false quotations were included, why these citations appeared in multiple filings, why some were later removed, and whether additional false citations exist somewhere. And perhaps most tellingly, the court also demands copies of communications, drafts of proposed orders, and correspondence with the trial court. Now, this isn't just about correcting a brief. This is about investigating how the error or misconduct actually occurred. Now, there are a handful of ways that something like this could happen. None of them are good. All right. First, it could be sloppy legal work. At the lowest level, this could be negligence, a failure to verify sources, a reliance on summaries instead of primary law, some breakdown in professional standards. Now, even that is serious because lawyers have an obligation to ensure what they submit to the court is accurate, unless anything less is sort of undermines the entire process. Two, technological overreach. There is a growing concern in the legal profession about the misuse of, see, and you thought this early on, artificial intelligence tools that generate case law citations, sometimes incorrectly. Now, if any of us have ever used Chat GPT or Claude or any of Copilot, any of the AI tools, if you look at the bottom of the screen, it says something like Chat GPT can make mistakes. Check important info. Let's be clear, using a tool is not a defense. Failing to verify is still the attorney's responsibility. Now, third way is this copy and paste culture. Another possibility is the uncritical reuse of prior work, lifting arguments and citations from other briefs without independently confirming them. Now, this kind of shortcut can compound errors over time, turning one mistake into a whole bunch. Now, four, this could easily be an intentional misrepresentation. Now, this is probably the most serious possibility, and the one the courts take the most seriously. If citations were knowingly fabricated to strengthen an argument, that crosses from negligence into misconduct. And misconduct in a criminal case is not just unethical, it can be unconstitutional and illegal. No, we need to know. So what happens now? There is a story. This is where the story moves from troubling to potentially explosive. If the court determines that this was not an isolated incident, the implications expand quickly. Other cases handled by the same attorney or even the same office could come under scrutiny and will. Defense attorneys may begin reviewing prior filings, looking for the similar issues. And if they find them, they may file motions for new trials, appeals based on prosecutorial misconduct, claims of due process violations. The key legal concept here is material prejudice, whether the misconduct affected the outcome of the case. If it did, courts may be forced to revisit these cases. Can you imagine? Let's just say 100 of these cases have to be rescheduled. What that does to the dockets in the Georgia courts. 100. And if there's more than that, it brings the entire system to a screeching halt. To the point where there may be people sitting in a county jail waiting for their trial that will now have to wait even longer because of this action. So at its core, the legal system runs on trust. Judges trust attorneys to present the law accurately. Attorneys trust opposing counsel to do the same thing. The public, we out here, trust the system to deliver justice based on truth. So when that trust is broken, even in small ways, the consequences can be large. And when it's broken in a criminal case where someone's freedom is on the line, their lives possibly, depending on where you are, the stakes could not be higher. This case raises a broader question about the pressures facing the legal system today. Caseloads are heavy. Deadlines are tight. Technology is evolving faster than professional norms can keep up with. In that environment, shortcuts can become tempting. But the law does not tolerate shortcuts when it comes to the truth. And courts, especially at the highest level, are increasingly willing to call that out. Now, the Georgia Supreme Court now sits at a critical juncture. It can treat this as a contained issue, resolve it within the confines of this case, and move on, or it could treat it as a warning sign, one that requires broader scrutiny and accountability, which is what we are going to ask them to do. The tone of the order suggests the court understands the stakes. Requiring a sworn affidavit is not routine. It signals that the court is taking this seriously. Now, we'd like to just say, oh, Georgia, blah, 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 right? But this is not just a Georgia story. Because across the country, courts are beginning to confront similar issues. Fabricated citations, the misuse of technology. We did a program here about that. You can go ahead and search the archives of the Morning Report, and you can see we did a show on this before on somebody getting busted using AI, and of course the declining standards in legal filings. So what happens with this case may influence how other courts respond in the future. In the end, this may be remembered as a moment when the system corrected itself. That would be great. The court identified a problem, it demanded answers, it required transparency. That is how accountability is supposed to work. But accountability only matters if it leads to change. All right, let me land this plane here. The law depends on truth, not just in testimony, but in the very cases that define it. If those cases are not real, then the arguments built on them are not real either. And if that happens often enough, the system does not just make mistakes, it risks losing its legitimacy. And that's why this case matters. Not because of one brief, not because of one attorney, but because it forces a question we cannot ignore. The foundation is shaky. What else is built on top of it? My name is Willie Lawson. This is the Morning Report. The Morning Report is a production of fightbackmedia.com, fightbackmedia.com, and fightbackmediatv.com. Until we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody, and for goodness sake, y'all take care of yourself. We will see you when we see you. Bye-bye now.